Welcome at this new episode. Episode 2 in my podcast series, The Making of the Magician's Daughter movie. Sometimes, hopefully less as I'm getting more experience in this craft of podcasting, I may need to introduce an episode. And the guest and I go off script as we did here. Or we have some problems with the sound, especially when the interview happens over the phone. So my apologies if there are some sound problems, although I think we were able to solve the original issues with it. In this episode, with the title Tears Over My Bacon, with my good friend and former colleague Mark Engel, we stray off the outline that I set out at the beginning. However, even though not everything that I set out to tell you about was discussed, but this episode has become an interesting conversation about many topics, such as the Showa Foundation and the people that work there, being a performer, how to interact with your audience as a stand-up comedian, how an independent filmmaker stays on the road financially, and the magic moments that we encounter and need to make a movie. This is a longer episode than usual, but keep listening until the end, especially if you're interested in the art of performing, whether it is as a magician or a comedian. Enjoy the episode. Anyway, this is welcome to the second episode of the podcast, Making the Magician's Daughter, and the search for the Jewish magician Ben Ali Libi. Today, I'm welcoming, if I can get any words in, I'm welcoming Mark Engel, an old colleague from the Showa Foundation, who remained a good friend over these 2 decennia, and a friend who makes me laugh every time that we speak, whenever I can get a word in. So I was already going off script, but so was he. But you make me laugh in setting this up. And of course you, such a performer, wanted this to be on video, and you put on your tux. But unfortunately, this is just through the phone. But we will make this happen before I leave for the Netherlands again this year. I'm sure we have lots to talk about the different subjects in this film, so I'm sure I can welcome you back. But it depends a little bit on how you behave.
I was going to say, if I don't behave, you're not going to want me back.
That you were going to ask me, before I could get anything in, you were going to ask me to tell you what happened this first month, because as in a good bad script, I need somebody to do the exposition, in the movie. So I want to tell the English-speaking audience about what happened in the first month of the making of the feature film, The Magician's Daughter, and this trip that I am on. But after, of course, we're going to freewheel and about what it means being a performer, as Ben Ali Libi advertised himself as being a humorous magician. So I wanted to sort of put in every episode now a link to the movie in a way, and as I'm so lucky that you are on board, as a performer, you can tell me all about, what performers do with their audience and how this affects them and themselves. So we'll go into that a little bit later. But could you introduce yourself a little bit? Tell us about yourself and how we know each other and, God forbid, how long.
We met as children 10 years ago. So as you had mentioned, we worked together at the Showa Foundation. I was in the middle of one of many steps along the circuitous path that I've taken in my life. I describe myself as a mutt. So I am a combination. I'm trained as a lawyer. I work as a marketing researcher, but I've also been doing stand-up comedy and improv comedy on and off for the past 35 years. So it's kind of a mix of those things, and we can talk later if you are interested in how all those things dovetail. But we worked together at the Showa Foundation in the mid-90s. I was working in the executive offices, answering letters on behalf of the president and the executive director and Steven Spielberg. And we just got to know each other, I think, walking around. And I said, "Oh, look at all these cool people here." And we just clicked. And we have stayed in touch for 25, 26 years, something like that, which, this is why you take jobs sometimes, is to meet great people. And maybe you don't do it for that purpose, but those are the things that you remember, in addition to the incredible work that we did. I mean, to be part of an organization that documented the eyewitness testimonies of Holocaust survivors and righteous Gentiles and other people with firsthand knowledge of that is just remarkable, and it's certainly one of the most humbling things that I've ever done, and grateful to have been part of that.
Yes, that I so agree with you. I couldn't have said it better. It's an experience that I will never forget and has shaped my life as they said it would. But yeah, the bonus is meeting all these great people that are in that organization for the same reason. And I'm still friends with so many of them over all these years, even when we are states apart and oceans apart. So it's definitely been great. So as a performer, I've only seen some of your performance on the internet, and I could share some links if you'd like.
And I haven't told my parents that I'm not practicing law, so maybe we just keep that on the hush hush. I don't know.
I'm going to call them right after this.
Perfect.
But, I'd love to see you in person performing one day. But for now, thank you for being my host buddy.
Well, thank you for inviting me to be your host buddy. This is truly an honor to get to do this with you. And I do hope you see me in person one day. But I want to talk about what's been going on with you. You've been back in the States for about a month now. Your podcast series is on the air as we speak. I mean, literally as we speak, and it's active on most platforms. I'm wondering, how's it going? What's been going on? How are you progressing the steps towards making the film The Magician's Daughter?
Yes, it's been quite a trip. So it's like every day something. I must say doing the podcast series is a lot of fun, but it's also a learning curve. Like only last night, half asleep, I did something and I hardly know what. And suddenly today we're finally on Apple Podcasts. So every day is something new, but I just love the whole podcasting experience. And because of the writer's strike, it's sort of the only thing that I can do at the moment, that I am allowed to do, as I am not able to promote my film. So I've sort of shifted my schedule a little bit. But, this whole trip started right away on day one. I was packed and stood at Schiphol. I'm going to now pronounce it weird. Schiphol Airport, the Dutch airport. And the flight was cancelled. So I had to wait a day. Unfortunately, I was close by and could spend the night again with my friends John and Yolanda, who are a big part of this film in a way too. So we'll get back to them later on when I get back to the Netherlands. But the success of this journey very often depends on the help of friends. At the moment, I am in Pasadena in the house that is being renovated by my friends, and we'll do an episode next week on that as well. But anyway, I flew to Portland, Oregon, where I left a suitcase, and the first week was full of arranging and thinking about where the next sleeping place would be and how would I get there.
All right, I want to know where you left this suitcase last year. When you left Portland, left a suitcase. Where was this? Who was it with? Is it at a hotel with a friend? Help me understand this.
Yes, it's sometimes sometimes my story gets very confusing. But last year I spent a few months in the States also working on this film. And then flying back, I found out that the third suitcase would be $265. So I left it with friends. It was in the attic. And so I thought of picking it up now. Anyway, I first arrived at the hotel, and then I was going to stay at some friends on the other side of the Columbia River in Vancouver, Washington. That was sort of my first week. Yeah, it was a little bit chaotic because I was thinking I couldn't get a sleeping place for sometimes I knew only a few days in advance. Mostly not more than a week. And so I needed a car. And I thought, like, well, a rental car, but they're expensive at the moment also after COVID. I basically, that first week, suddenly bought a car. And as I came on this trip with almost no money, you would think, like, how can I suddenly buy a car?
That's what I was wondering, because I would think you would want to, rent it for a little bit, but I guess those rental charges add up. You could probably buy it in over the course of a few months of renting it. It was probably, did you do the math, or just figure, you know what, I'm going to buy a car?
No, it was actually one of those magic moments that sort of show you that things are falling into place. And to me, those kind of things show that I'm on the right path, even though it's a difficult path. So just before I left the Netherlands, I got an email and an offer from my American credit union in Los Angeles that they pre-approved me for a car loan. And I was like, what? And then, of course, I was also sort of, my son's voice echoing in my head, don't put more debt on yourself. And so, you know what? I just had to do it because it is math. And so it's either doing expensive rental cars on the little bit of space I have on my on my credit cards, which is 29% interest, or buy a car with 6.9% interest. So I bought a car. And then a week later, not even a week later, I went to another friend on the West Coast, and she looked at the car and said, I'll buy it from you when you leave for Holland again. So within 1 week, I bought a car and I sold a car, and I'm driving in that. It's the pure Dutch way.
And you're funding part of the film with the profits from the car. No.
Yeah, exactly.
That I think you could teach some financial awareness courses here on how to do that, because I knew that, like, Americans in general, we pile up a lot of debt, right? I mean, like, I don't know, $50,000, something like that. The average American is $50,000-$60,000 in debt. So I guess it is kind of a very American thing to do if you had to get into debt.
I know. It's so against the Dutch way, actually, because you would never get credit cards, and definitely not this way. And so, yeah, I looked it up, and the average American per person has $58,000 in debt. And that's just, amazing. And that would not happen in the Netherlands. So Dutch people look at me like, a lot of my Dutch friends, they are even scared in the way that how I do this trip or have lived my life until now.
Right. But you also, you're doing this you're not just funding spending habits for nothing. You're doing this to put money into your film. So it's kind of like you're investing in your future.
Right. And so the huge credit card debt is, I always say I don't understand why I'm divorced twice, because I'm such a cheap woman. I don't drink, I don't smoke, I don't do drugs, I don't do jewelry, I don't do clothes, but I do put all my money in my movie making. So this film has taken all that credit card debt. And yeah, one of the things I hope for this year is to finally finance it in a normal way and to be able to get that personal debt off my shoulders now. Like this month is already difficult. And so when I lost my income 3 months ago, I knew I would be able to probably survive for 3 months. And we've come to this moment in time that I need to find extra income. And it's been difficult.
Well, tell me a little bit about what happened. So you were working, you continued to do translating for quite a while.
Right. After the Showa Foundation, I think about a year or 2 years later, I came across this job as a subtitler, and it was wonderful. I could do it freelance. I've been doing that until about 3 months ago. Now with AI coming up, translation is done more and more by machines. And there's a combination of situations that happened that I lost my job there. So, I did talk to 3 clients. I'm on the waiting list for one. The other one says work is coming. And the other one says, well, we get some projects during the summer. And I'm thinking, it's very hot here. Isn't this summer? But you will see it will come when I'm not in LA anymore, because in August I will go off to Northern California again, hoping in these last 2-3 weeks in July that I will find some paid work.
Right.
Yeah.
I think you can ask ChatGPT maybe ChatGPT could pay off your debt.
I love that idea. I should do this online and add a podcast in a podcast episode. I think that's a great idea.
You never know. I think it's capable of so many things. We can turn it to benefit us, that make sure we're in charge of it, right?
Right. Well, you know what? I was very cocky in the beginning, and my son is sort of my tech advisor here and there. And so I said, I can, get ChatGPT's panties in a twizzy, and I'll ask it some questions that it won't know the answer to. And of course, it knew the answer to everything. So I don't know. I think we've lost that. We've lost that fight. Yeah.
Right. It almost seems like magic how that works. But
I know.
Maybe it is. Maybe it isn't. You mentioned something before. You said, things sometimes have a way of falling into place. So as you were talking about how, it's summertime and you're kind of, you're anticipating some projects around kind of a wait list there, things would probably happen when you least expect it, when you're not directly looking for it. I know you were kind of nose to the grindstone. Is that the right expression? I think head down, nose to the grindstone. I think that's the expression. And I'm sure it sounds even cooler in Dutch, but there's no way I could say it because I can't replicate you. ChatGPT can't do your voice. Your voice is so incredible, and the accent is just something I love hearing. But I sidetracked there. You are head down, nose to the grindstone, working on the script right now. So tell me, how is that going? How is that process? I know you have a deadline coming up, right?
Right. It's actually funny what you say about, of course, one of the things, the writers strike at the moment, but the actors are striking almost, right? Or they were almost. And one of the things is actually AI can impersonate your voice. So I'm sure there will be a Gerrie cloned if I ever get famous. There will be
what's your middle name? Does your middle name begin with a P? Because it's GPT. It could be Gerrie P. Timmerman.
I know it actually already cloned me. Officially, I do have a middle name, Theodora, which means the gift of God. And I'm not sure if AI is a gift of God or of the devil. So it could be Gerard, and what is then with a P? There must be something with Penelope. Yeah, that could be a devil. Well, we'll see in the end. So yeah, there is a big element of magic and of surprise in this trip. Before I came out, I talked to a former colleague, and sometimes a client, Jelena. And she said, I can help you in all kinds of ways, but come to LA. And I was like, no, I need work now. But you don't want to be desperate, right? So anyway, at some point, finally took me about a month, 3 weeks a month, to come to LA, drive down from Washington State on the West Coast. So we were supposed to meet on Friday. I only had Friday and Saturday, I had a place to sleep in LA. And then I was going to close to San Diego. And so at the last minute, Jelena, who's originally from the Ukraine, cancels. And I'm panicking because I'm thinking that was like on Thursday. And so she canceled for Friday. And now I needed another. So that is another hotel. And so every hotel is at least $100 in this, unless I go in a scary hotel. motel or something. But, then still it's close to 100. So I was a little nervous. But okay, I did that. And then we were supposed to meet on Saturday. So I drove to the other side. I was in Pasadena at that time. No, I was in, north of LA. And then I drove to the west side of LA. And I was like, well, what do I know there at the moment, which is Mel's Diner, which many tourists will know. It's close to Hollywood Boulevard. And they have validated parking. Well, actually not validated, it's paid parking. But I thought like, I'll have a little bit of breakfast. And then 1 hour before I was supposed to meet Yelena, she cancels again. And that really... that devastated me, because I'm thinking this is my only chance to get work, but paid work. And so I started crying in the middle of Mel's Diner. Nobody looked up. Apparently, a lot of people are crying at Mel's Diner. Right. And, my whole bacon got soggy because of it. And then I called a friend to vent and I don't know what to do. And my friend said, but you have to tell her. And I said, you don't understand. Yelena has been telling me over the weeks what has happened with her Ukrainian family. Oh, boy. And so, she mentioned that in the last year, she lost all of her male relatives, most of her male relatives in the Ukraine. And so I understand her despair and her frame of mind. And then just in the week before, a Russian missile hit the apartment building of her nephew and his girlfriend. And so thank God they were, no bodily harm, but no house anymore. And so she had an aneurysm from all the stress. Oh my gosh. I know. How can I put more pressure on somebody that, that has to deal with those kind of things, every day. So it was a weird moment, and I thought like, I'll give up. And then she texted me again and said, well, let's at least hug each other in front of the hairdresser where she needed to go. And I was like, okay. And so I went, got the car and drove along her way. And then she calls me from the road and says, well, if this is about work will be coming, but I also wanted to help you with your film. And I have a whole Ukrainian post-production team ready for you. People that got out of the Ukraine, invested in equipment, so to have a new future. And they will work for you for deferred pay. And so in an hour, not even an hour, I went from tears over my bacon to having a full production team, a post-production team. And as I said to her, just come on board as a producer. So that is a very extreme example of how these magic moments start. And I said to her, I'd love to do a podcast episode with that team, because I think a lot of people would be interested in how they live their lives and what are they hoping for the future.
Wow.
And I said this will be, what they are doing for my film is good for my film, but maybe my film can be good for them. Absolutely. And get some more, interest in their lives and in their future.
I'm struck by, Yelena being in this, the depths of such despair and still wanting to help you and focusing on that. And, obviously you engender those kinds of people, to be around you. So I'm not surprised by that, but for her to do that in the midst of everything that was going on with her family, her own personal health, what she had just learned about her nephew and his girlfriend, and for her to say, nope, we're going to get the hug, work's going to come to you. I mean, that's got to be such a motivating force for you. And like you said, another sign of the magic that's around. I think if we're willing to pay attention to it and see it and look for those moments of goodness. Wow.
This movie, of course, has very serious subject matter, like Ben Ali Libi, who lost his life in the Holocaust. But I do see, some similarities with what is going on with the war in Ukraine. And you can never compare suffering, but I think I am maybe more open to even let's keep it with similarities. Because we always hope that things don't happen again, and then you see it again and again. And I think we just can't close our eyes off for this. And so, when you see things like this, then we all need sort of to do what we can do to help each other.
I think telling people's stories is certainly one way to help keep memories alive. I mean, for people who are living it, for the Ukrainian film team and production team that can share their stories. Thankfully, they have survived. That helps keep it fresh in real time. The story that you are telling about Ben Ali Libi is keeping the memory of him alive, so that in the hopes that we don't forget. And I agree with you that so many people seem to forget the lessons, but I think what you're doing is so vital to pushing forward in the right direction, to moving the world to a better place, one story at a time, which is its own form of magic in some way. When you think about people who have passed, and you're telling their story, and it's as if they're alive again in some ways.
Yes, it is. It is a balance in how to compare. That the memory stays alive, how important that is. And I think, coming from us both coming from the Shoah Foundation, as a workplace, we know how important it is to keep these stories alive. And also how inspiring their lives can be to us. So, it's like I love storytelling, and this film haunts me. So it's not only me wanting to tell his story or their story, but them, want to tell their story through us. And, I'll go into that, in other episodes as well, because it's all an interesting, interwoven, connected way of storytelling.
And I don't know if this is appropriate for this episode or a future one, but I'm curious how, as you continue living your own life, how the process of drawing out that story, you said it haunts you in some ways. I'm wondering how the process, how the way you think about this story has changed over the course of the time that you've been working on the script.
Good question. That could be 3 episodes. Well, it's sort of interesting because this story about Ben Ali Libi it's been more than 20 years that I'm working on this. And there have been like a couple of times that I wanted to give up. The first time was when I was really deep into the research of the Holocaust, and it gave me nightmares. And I thought, I'm not sure if I can continue. And then I do this with other things in my life as well. If I really have a burning question, I'll go to a bookstore. I'll go to any aisle, I'm not even looking where I am, and I pick one book, open it, and look for the answer on that page. This time I was awake at night, house sitting also in Holland at the time, because I was in between things again. And I thought, I have to give this up. And this was a filmmaker's house, and he had one room which was sort of a study with books all over one large wall. And it was dark, and I didn't want to put on light for the neighbors. And so I went, and that book, and I'm sure there were thousands of books in that room. It was not even a small room, in that room. And what I found was a book of a Dutch filmmaker whose father had been in vaudeville, and that's what he wrote his book about. And it was like, okay, I have to continue. And he had, I think his mother was German, and so there was a whole difficult, of course, relationship, or a whole other thing going on, of course, in his life, because, during or after the war, having to deal with what came out of that in society must have been also difficult. And so that's just one of the times that okay, I'll continue. And so sometimes it's been haunting, and but I love this project because it has given me, and not only me but also other people during the process, amazing, beautiful things where I realized this was not even about me anymore, or this was not even, only for my benefit. It was for so many other people's benefit, besides that Ben Ali Libi's memory will be cherished, and that, that in itself. But I'll just keep going and hope for more magical moments, to finally find that, that co-producer or that investor that can help us make it really, put it on the big screen.
Mm-hmm. I'm struck by something you just said there about having, it's almost like it's become more than just your story. It's not only part of it is the autobiographical piece, but then also the story that you've created. But if I heard you correctly, it sounds like this is a story that goes beyond that too. And I've heard many artists talk about how, either maybe a musician says, well, the song came to me and it's coming through me, and you're almost like the conduit for getting that story out there. And I don't know if you're seeing that for yourself. Am I hearing that that's how you're seeing it?
Yes. And again, it's very difficult to talk about. See, Americans love these kind of stories, but the Dutch, they're very grounded, and they don't always believe in that magical part of life. And so it's sometimes really difficult to explain it to Dutch people what is so magical and special about this story. I'm almost tempted to tell a story, but maybe I shouldn't. Because again, it's like I don't want. I know this is a cliffhanger. So, you know what? It gave me an idea of that I could do a podcast with a filmmaker that also did a podcast that also did a movie on Ben Ali Libi, the documentary that we both co-produced. And I think we look at this from different angles, and I think it would make a fascinating podcast episode. But we'll see if I can get him to do that. That would be amazing.
What would be one thing you would teach your fellow Dutch country folks to help them believe in a little more of that magical side of life? It sounds like you said they're very grounded. It sounded like it was hard for them to access that part of life.
Well, I think in the end, a good film has a universal language. And I'm hoping that the film ultimately tells, brings the message of that magic that is universal and that crosses, all over the world, boundaries all over the world. When I was just in this country, Americans always ask, what's the difference between the Netherlands and the United States? And I said, well, in Holland, the glass is always half empty. And in the States, and simple. But it's sort of true. And even after almost 30 years when I came back, it changed a little bit, but still it's sort of like the big difference. And I must say that the older I get, I still see I have a lot of Dutch still in me. I see the bears on the road before I see the unicorn. And I have to rescue the unicorn from the bear, but ultimately I do see the unicorn. And it's like we will see more in the podcasts on those magical moments that keep happening, and then ultimately the film has to deliver. So hopefully in August, when I have 3 weeks to just sit down in Northern California and not be disturbed and hopefully write it the way that that I want it to come across.
The bears on the road, it creates the excitement of the trip, right? You can save the unicorns from wind blowing or something, but if bears, that's a much more daunting nemesis for the unicorns.
Right, 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 right.
Not everybody's even seeing the unicorns that are there, so that's it's a very you thing to be able to do. And I'm very much looking forward to continuing to hear what happens in the rest of your summer, and how your story progresses as you progress the story of the magician's daughter.
Thank you. So I'm looking. We talked 40 minutes. That's 10 more minutes than I thought this would take, and we were going to. But we were going to lighten up a little bit at the end, remember? And do the thing, what I love most with you is just, freewheel. And in our conversations that sometimes still go deep, we have so much laughter. And I think we should also not forget how important that is. I would like to, connect with the film for a little bit. And, it's the research that I did on Ben Ali Libi at the time, when I started in 1998, there was almost nothing known of this man. And I found all kinds of things and a lot of ads. And in one of those ads, he called himself a humorous or a witty magician. And knowing my father, of course, was a magician too, and he always was very funny on stage. And so there's something in the performer improvisation. How do you deal with that audience? And you being a performer, I want you to tell me the magic that a performer knows.
Well, I love the comparison between magicians and comedians, because there really is something. I don't know if it's sleight of hand. It feels like magicians and comedians operate almost at different levels, seeing things that most people don't see, paying attention to certain things, and getting you to, I guess with magicians, in some cases, not paying attention to certain things, and with comedians, really homing in on something and paying exquisite, detailed attention to certain things. But I think of people like Steve Martin, and I know there are other comedians who started as magicians, and
right.
There is definitely a thread through there of people who do that. But you're putting on a show. You're getting people to see things in new ways and in new perspectives. You're keeping their attention through, with magicians, through visual, it's through hand gestures and props. And while there are some comedians who use props, I think of words being that, the tools that they use and that they wield to bring people along and take them in a certain direction. And, the key to great comedy is that at the very end, you're steering off in another direction, and magic does the same thing. So you're kind of expecting one thing, and then the unexpected happens. With magic, the audience is wowed. With comedy, the audience it may be wowed, but they're also they're hit in a certain way that they can't help but laugh. The responses that magicians and comedians prompt are involuntary. If you are in awe of what a magician does, that's just happening. You're as an audience member, your eyes widen, your heart races. For a comedian, you have this involuntary laughter that it just comes up because it's connecting with something deeper in you. And I think that I think magic does that too. There's something in there. I don't know. It's kind of like things you might look at and take for granted are shown in a new light. It's both so entertaining to enjoy as an audience member. As a performer, I took a magic class at the Rochester Museum of Science when I was growing up, and out of all of that, and I don't remember how many Saturdays my parents drove me downtown to go to that class. I think I remember one card trick. But I remember they're like one principle of just kind of the flair of it and the performance side of it. And, a simple card trick, you add a pencil with an eraser to move the cards around. And all of a sudden there's a flow. It's almost like a ballet in some ways for what I remember from this magician whose name I can't remember, unfortunately. But there is definitely something, it's very intriguing. Like as a comedian, to look at other forms of art, I'm always awed by that special skill that makes their thing different. And then I love trying to find the commonalities.
Is that why you took that class?
I don't know. I think at that point, well, here we go. Confessional time. When I was like 5 or 6, I just wanted to be a game show host. So I think that was my way of being up on stage. I was a model when I was a kid, so I was used to like having the camera on me. That's why I wore the tux today for this phone call that we're doing. There was, I think I just liked being up there and felt very comfortable being the center of attention. Arrogant as that sounds now, and I'm just kidding. And I think what it was when I was little was, oh, it's the approval, it's the pleaser. Look at me, like me kind of thing. But as I have evolved in doing comedy, first of all, my stand-up has become more improvisational. I know you talked about improvisation earlier. That ability to field, almost like a baseball player would field whatever comes to them. The ability to deal with whatever is happening at that moment and to really, really be present, and to take that in and adapt. And I know some comedians are just brilliant at crafting the exact words, and I know Seinfeld, for example, writes everything out meticulously and refines it. And so many comedians do this. They'll tell jokes in different ways to get the wording down exactly. I feel like for me, mine has become a little bit more of a storytelling style, because I am inspired by my friends who are storytellers. I also feel that the motivation behind my performing is much less about look at me, love me, like me. I'm sure it's absolutely a wonderful thing to hear the roar of an audience laughing at something you said, something you created, something they didn't expect. But what's even deeper than that I really find rewarding is the connection, the connective piece between that. And I think magicians have this, musicians have this, dancers have this. It's a performance is really a conversation. There's a connection that the performer has with the audience, and there's a connection that the audience shares with each other by experiencing something together. These are strangers who are brought together in a room. It's like going to the movies as well. You watch a movie, you're laughing at the funny parts, you're crying at the sad or the moving parts, your heart is racing at the adventure parts. I think there's something really special about us as human beings to connect at that level from a shared experience of art. That to me is also one way, to kind of hopefully be able to move past so many of the seemingly intransigent differences that people have, and the ways people put up walls and borders between their subgroup. And if you say up, I'm going to say down just because you said up, that kind of thing. But I think when you have the shared experience of art, that's something that you almost can't help your reaction. Funny is funny, and I realize different people find different things funny, but beautiful music is beautiful music, and it touches us. What a magician does is it can be death-defying. We're in awe. David Blaine is inside an ice cube or whatever he's doing, but there's just something that goes beyond the everyday. And I think the term magical can apply to other forms of art.
Definitely.
It's the best of humans. Sorry, that was a very long solution.
No, and it was fascinating to me because I realized something. I've always been sort of like perplexed by performers. At first, I always thought like, oh, they're attention seekers. I didn't get it. Of course, I had some jealousy as a child, because my father and my brother were always performing, and were always working together. And of course, as a child, you want that too. But it's something you just said about connection. And I thought, like, when you're doing improv, you really have to stay in the moment to be able to to react. And one of the things that I've actually learned also through this film, through my life, is to more and more be in that moment. And I've never I don't think I've ever been able to do that right. I'm in awe when performers then can do that. And with improv, of course, you definitely have to do that. So I'm definitely in awe of that. But what you said about, like, people would say, like, oh, I love going to the movies because it's the connection with the other people. And maybe I'm like confessing something disturbing, but I'd rather have that movie theater for myself, and forget about all the other people. I'm not connecting to them. I'm connecting to the story on screen. But
Right.
I learned something from what you just told me, and I thought that was a wise lesson. Thank you so much.
Oh, gosh, thank you for drawing that out. One thing you just said reminds me of how I felt about improv initially. Is I would hold myself back. I think as strange as it is, because we improvise our lives, right?
Right.
Most of us don't script every moment of every day. Things happen and we respond to it. But when it comes to performing, improvisation, I've always found much more challenging than stand-up. And I think I had the same fear, and sometimes still do for the times, if and when I'm doing any sort of performing, improv performing, it's that, you kind of hold yourself back. What if I say something stupid or say something silly, or, well, silly's good. But if I say something
Right.
stupid or makes me look like, oh, well, he wasn't paying attention and he's lost. I understand that fear. And I think there's something so metaphorical about embracing that more improvisational way of going about things, because it's saying, look, we're all human. We're all going to make mistakes. We can even celebrate those mistakes. And, as long as it's not, oops, didn't mean to hit that red button, hopefully the mistakes have small stakes to them. And a friend of mine with whom I do improv work in a business setting. He's an actor in Canada. His name is Pascal Patinode. He reminds me that mistakes are just, you can think of them as mistakes, like in a film,
Right.
So you do it again and you get it better. But it's really dialing into each other that I think is the magic of improvisation.
Right.
And I think when I tried to do improv in college, I came at it with a stand-up's mindset of like having everything structured. And with stand-up, there's a lot more of a logical progression,
Right.
but improvisation is much more like life itself, right? And it's being open to what's going on around you, and then any way you're going to react is going to be based on all of your experience, and you're kind of drawing in like, well, what have I done in the past, and what have I seen other people do in the past? So it really is all about that connect. It's about presence and it's about connection.
What I also found, and what's coming back in the film a little bit, is like magicians, they have a very good sense of character. They can gauge their audience. They know exactly who to put on stage, to ask on stage, and who not. And I can see with improv, you're sort of doing the same thing with your audience. So I always thought a little bit, again, it's like for a long, long time, I really disliked magic. So I would always look at the negative, the half empty glass for it, and I thought it was manipulation. But at the same time, I'm thinking I'm in awe of when you have that sense of character of your audience. Is it something that as a stand-up comedian you do the same thing? Because sometimes these audiences are pretty hostile.
Yeah, I think you definitely have to be dialed in to where they are, and it's kind of a good parallel for any kind of interaction we have throughout the course of our daily lives. The more we can dial into where somebody else is, the more we can truly understand them and relate to them and connect with them. And it's interesting that you said that about the magicians, and I hadn't thought about that aspect, but it rings true when I think about the great magicians. Having such a connection with the audience, reading the audience as a whole, but like you said, if they're picking out somebody to be an assistant for something, figuring out the right kind of personality, I think the best ones will honor that person and maybe playfully, we'll joke around with them, but hopefully never maligning them. But if you've got somebody who seems, however they sense that, of being able to banter with them or say, oh, this person's going to be a good sport and will really play along. I love that and appreciate that about magicians. I think for comedians, it can feel more hostile, but I guess that's up to the comedian on whether they want to play it as like, oh, I want to be combative because this person is genuinely heckling me, and if I put that person down, then the audience is going to appreciate it because they're probably annoyed with the heckler too. They didn't pay to hear a heckler; they paid, and to hear the comedian. But sometimes, something can happen in the crowd. Often, it becomes an improvisational moment, even in a stand-up performance, where the comedian is interacting and responding to what's going on in the room. And it is a shared experience that now the comedian is also part of that, in addition to the audience. So it almost feels like it's, in some ways, it's like putting your arms around the entire audience, saying, come up on stage with me and be part of this. And it's unfolding. And I think that's why there's such a rush to watching comedy. I mean, watching improv always happens like that, but stand up, if it's not in a giant auditorium where it's all scripted. I mean, the people who do their specials on HBO work so hard and so long to get that crafted in the right way, and it is a performance. And maybe something happens in the audience that they respond to, and it's great when it does. I think you feel that certainly in a club setting. It's more intimate. You are literally closer to each other, so
Right.
You're breathing the same air. You're literally sharing laughter. Right. With the person next to you and the person at the next table over, and you're a lot closer. But I think that's part of the fun. You never know what's going to happen.
Right. That's the magic.
That's the magic.
It's the magic. Well, thank you so much for talking with me. And if the listeners want to know more, I hope you are sharing some links with me. If you have performances that you want the audience to see, I'll put those in the show notes. And for the listeners that want more episodes with Mark, then just send me an email and I'll grill him again.
I would be honored. This has truly been an honor to get to talk with you. I've been so excited and inspired by the work that you're doing on your film, and the fact that you're doing a podcast about your journey. It's very meta. That's lowercase m, not promoting any one company here. Unless they want to be a sponsor. I don't know. But I really, I'm fascinated by what you're doing. I am very excited to see how this grows and to see where you end up. And I know you're working so hard at this, every day doing something in furtherance of this. This is coming from your place of passion. And I admire you, and I admire what you're doing, and can't wait to see what's happening in the weeks and months ahead.
Okay. Thank you so much, Mark. And hopefully I'll see you soon.
All right. Sounds good. Bedankt.
Okay. Thank you. Oh, very good. Thank you. Bye, Mark.
Bye-bye.
Well, I hoped you stayed with us until the end and learned more about performers and their craft. I hinted in the interview a little about what I learned through my research about the Jewish magician Ben Ali Libi as a performer. In other episodes, we will find out more about Ben Ali Libi and how this craft has and could have helped him as his life unfolded, and it brought him more challenges along the way. So keep tuning in. See you next time, or hear you next time. Thank you for listening.